fact, just got new glasses, so my own face looks slightly unfamiliar. So this is a perfect time to make a new YouTube video. Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. Today I am reviewing Wasteland Woes by Isaac Cooke-Khan. This is the first book in the Fallout family series, a mid-grade series about a pair of siblings and their dog as they try to survive in the apocalypse. Now this world has been apocalyptic for a while, it seems like. Our younger protagonist has basically grown up in this world, and there are mutants and droughts and all the usual post-apocalyptic stuff. But the particular crux of the story, as told by the synopsis, is that a thing has happened and James is left weak and in need of help in the wasteland, even though he is usually the protector, and Piper, the younger sister, must brave the wasteland on her own for the first time to help save him. However, while the synopsis has that as being the crux of the story, that's not really the crux of the story necessarily. In fact, that inciting incident doesn't happen until 2/3 of the way through the book. Granted, this book is very short, 60-some pages. So that incident doesn't happen until the 40-page mark. And in fact, the majority of the narrative is actually told from the point of view of the dog. The book begins with the dog, how she lost her previous owner, and her finding the siblings. A lot of work is spent on getting the dog from point A to point B, and that takes up the majority of the book's runtime. The actual inciting incident from the synopsis doesn't happen until the final third of the book. Now, obviously, we can talk about things like different story structures and all of that, but functionally, this is the dog's book. And the synopsis does not feel deceptive. Obviously, there's no lies. The things that it mentions in the plot happen, but from a purely vibe, tonal standpoint, I really wished it had been edited to more accurately reflect that, oh, hey, this is the dog story, because I kind of felt bummed that the plot I was here for was actually the minority portion of the book. The actual rescue did not take that long. And I have learned about myself that I just prefer longer books in general. Like, the more and more I read, the more I don't gravitate towards any books under 200 pages. I tend to go for the longer and longer and longer ones. But obviously I can make an exception for a mid-grade. However, 60-some pages is still pretty short for like a upper mid-grade. This, at times, read to me as more kidlit. And if you aren't aware, kidlit is basically like first, second grade, early third grade ages, and then upper mid-grade. What we think of a lot of the time when we say mid-grade is like books that a third grader, but like later on in the year, third grade is a big transitionary year, and higher grades would read. At least that's what I gathered from its length and also from its sentence structure. It had a very simplistic, overly expository sentence structure. For example, it would say something like, this raider has scary looking armor on and covered in blood, and then the narrative would have to tell you that means he's dangerous. When, like, I feel like even a child would know that if a person was standing there in like spiky armor and had a weapon and was covered in blood, like that, most children could probably figure out danger. Like, you could probably put two and two together. But then they would also use a lot of like big words. And I was trying to figure out, like, okay, you have a sentence structure clearly meant for younger kids that maybe don't know to put two and two together, but then you have words that are clearly outside of their vocabulary. And so maybe this book is meant to be read aloud, but even then, if this book is meant to be read aloud, then the person reading it could probably help make the connections and you wouldn't need to rely on the narrative. Like, it's kind of muddy in that. And I get that that can be really tricky when you're writing for mid-grade and you want it to be a book the kid can read on their own, so you have to purposefully simplify your language, especially if you're used to reading a lot of big words or using a lot of big words. But that was definitely kind of at odds with each other. I could not tell what age range this one was going for. But again, going back to the length, again, I have no problems necessarily against a shorter book, but also you have to write within the length you're working with. Like, if you have a canvas of a specific length, you want your picture in this metaphor to be a specific size, you still have to fill in the canvas in a satisfying way and not make people feel like there was something cut off on the edges. Does that make sense? Like, if the author only wanted this to be 60 some pages, but wanted the crux of the story to be Piper and James and them finding each other in the wasteland, then cut out the stuff with the dog and move that up so that you can give more room to breathe, so that Piper's trek across the wasteland took longer than, 10 pages. Or else kind of focus on fewer dangers, because there's a lot of dangers that were talked about, but there were so many and they were so passing that I felt less like these are real and present things in the world and more like a quick rock through, like you were riding a dark ride past scenes of danger, but you couldn't stop, so it didn't necessarily feel like they were real and omnipresent and actually going to like pose a threat, that kind of thing. So I would have either simplified the plot in general and focused on fewer dangers, or have it start earlier, like still establish the siblings relationship, which was established fairly well, but like establish the siblings relationship early on, and then have again early on have the separation happen, and have Piper's trek across the wasteland be the story, because the synopsis makes it sound like that's the story, but in reality it's Miss Bella's story. The dog gets more precedence. The dog took up more time than the humans, and that's fine. Some people like a dog story as opposed to anyone else, but like if that's the story, then market that story and make it that story, or shift it and make it Piper's story. Like, does that make sense? It feels like there wasn't a lot of room given to what the synopsis said the plot was, so I would change one of those, although this isn't beta feedback, this is a review. So in short, I gave this book 3 stars. It was pretty good for what was there. I liked a lot of the ideas in it, which is apparently just what I've been saying a lot lately. I like the ideas. They didn't get room to breathe, and I'm honestly starting to think that maybe I need to start saying that I don't accept books under certain page counts, because every time I've accepted a book under 200 pages, I seem to be saying the exact same things. So at this point, I am kind of coming to the realization of it's either a trend because of publishing restrictions, or it's a thing with me. Regardless, I still think there's merit in this if you like a mid-grade, if you like post-apocalypse, if you like dog stories. Miss Bella is cute, as always, because dogs usually are. And in general, I would still suggest this one as a quick read. It was very simple. I read it in like one sitting. But in general, I will not be continuing with this series. And yes, I will probably have to like really sit and think about whether or not I'm just going to focus more on long books in general. Apparently, I just forgot to close out the video. So with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.